Rob Havenstein will not participate today. Neither will Neville Gallimore, Joe Noteboom, or Charles Woods. Everybody else should be good.
Do you think Rob could come back this week?
There's a possibility. We'll take it a day at a time. Today's just more kind of mental today, Jordan, just because of us playing on Monday night. But I wouldn't say no chance, but probably less likely than likely.
Is this the ankle again for Joe?
It is. Yeah, he got his ankle.
I know you mentioned some special teams on the Stinger.
Yep.
Do you expect him to be able to play again this season?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Would Warren play right tackle if those guys both couldn't do it?
He would.
Could he play right tackle even if no boom is available?
There's a possibility of that. I think, we'll see how Joe progresses. Warren's played some quality snaps for us this year, especially on the right side, so definitely a possibility.
Do you think there will ever be a time where you guys will have your projected 5 that you went into training camp with playing?
Your guess is as good as mine. I do know this. It's been those guys have wanted to be out here, and it's been 22 was a different year, but in terms of the amount of moving parts and where it's like guys are out for not the whole year but extended periods of time, that affects your ability to develop some continuity. I feel for those guys because and it's been some challenging unique circumstances for sure. You certainly hope so, but here we are 10 weeks in, and it just seems like you're getting more resilient to be able to handle it. But I do feel for the guys. That's one of the worst parts about this, Gary, is the amount of work and time and effort and dedication that goes into preparing for a season. And then when a lot of things that happen, especially for these players, that is totally out of their control, and it limits their availability to be able to go out and compete with their teammates and be factors for our team. It's been challenging. It was, there were some tough things, and again, football is the greatest team sport that there is. You give credit to the Dolphins, but there was a lot of instances, and I think you have to acknowledge the fact that there was, 60% of our guys that were out there hadn't played football in months, and so you always try to simulate those things in practice settings, but it's very difficult. You always want to make sure that as a coach you're putting guys in positions to have success. And I know guys are competing to the best of their ability, but there were some things that, we expect better. And, you also look at yourself and say, are we doing exactly the right things, even though if we might think that, let's learn from it and let's apply it moving forward.
Sean, you mentioned after the game on Monday that you're evaluating everything.
Mm-hmm.
What did you find in that evaluation, and what tangible changes, if any, might we see moving forward?
Yeah, I think, it's continuing to figure out, all right, what personnels, what specific guys do you want to try to be able to put into some spots. And, I think in a lot of instances, similar to Gary's question, you look at it and you say, all right, well, we've got 8 games remaining, but you also have a responsibility to say, well, let's do what we think is best for this upcoming game and continue to monitor that. And so those are some of the things that will be reflected. And, every single week, I think, even, Mikel Arteta is here today, and you talk to him, and, each week might require a different approach. And I think what we're continuously learning about this team is what's the makeup, what are the consistent guys that we have, and what are the ways that we can ultimately put it together, offense, defense, and special teams. And that's been a thing that, when you reflect back on being in year 8, has been different. There's been some things that have been consistent, and there's been some things that are different, but how do we ultimately figure out what is the best for the Patriots game? And as it relates to our offense specifically, personnel, scheme, all those types of things are kind of what we evaluate.
Is Colby healthy? He hasn't been playing.
He is. What we were looking at is, I think Kaylee does a great job with those tight ends, and it's really just, we've had some different personnel groupings, and it's really trying to maximize those 3 guys, both Davis, Hunter, and obviously Colby. They've done some good things, but I think, the strength of the unit is in that unit and being able to get all those guys involved.
Still small sample size, but have you seen the red zone spacing change at all with Cooper back?
Yeah, it's a small sample size, and we could sit there and we could watch some of the possessions that we've had, and you look at it when it's been good, and there's a lot of different factors, and there's so many things that go into it, whether it's, all right, what's your success in terms of, being able to run it or throw it? What's the coverage? Did we win on that individual matchup? Did things go off schedule, and did we distribute the field? And so at the end of the day, lately, it hasn't been good enough, collectively as a whole. And that was really probably the defining factor in the outcome of the game. One of the major defining factors is us not being able to finish in the red area.
From week 5 onward, and I think a little bit before that too, but it seemed like Chris and his assistants and probably yourself as well went through like level by level and addressed certain things in each level of the defense instead of trying to like sweep through and fix everything all at once.
Sure.
And some of the guys have said that was really helpful and simplified their learning process, that you guys really hammered in on certain specifics. What led to that approach? Is that just the normal way that you were thinking about things, or did you really think, okay, let's look here, then let's look here, and then let's look here?
Well, it was collective, and it was all 3 levels. Now, I think there was a really good job by Chris and his coaches of being able to, present it in digestible increments that it feels like, all right, hey, you're able to present some different things, but it is simpler. And the concepts and being able to teach guys, some different locations and spots. And so I think a couple things have been stimulated from that. It's evaluating, all right, what do we have? What does that really look like? I think we all talked a lot about, the post-Aaron Donald life, and then you get a sample size of what it looks like, and you're saying, okay, so now here's some real tangible evidence of this is what we've been, and then this is ultimately what's going to be best for this group. And I think it represents tremendous flexibility, agility on Chris and his coaches' perspective and just their views for what's the best way to utilize our group. And then, what's been really cool is by nature of just, all right, who's available and how do we maximize these guys? What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, and by necessity, you're saying, okay, this is the group that we've got. And then you start to learn about how versatile some of these players are and what they can really bring to life. And I think that's been on display. And I think there's been some incremental abilities to be able to build on that, specifically really from, week 5 and on. And there's a confidence that's been compounded in that as well. And like anything else, I think on both sides, things start up front. And I think, because we've done a really good job on the front, it's really positively affected the second and third levels. And I think we're really playing defense 11 as one. And been really proud of that group, and they're fun to watch.
Do you think there's anything you can take from that teaching progression and flip it to the offensive side of things piece by piece, or is it different when you're game planning?
There is yes, but there is also, as Jordan, there's a difference between defense and offensive football. Some of the continuity things, the thing that you talk about is, all right, how do you continuously try to identify and establish an identity? And there's been a lot of moving parts, and you can say it's an excuse, but there's some truth to it too when you do look back on it. And ultimately, you're hopeful that we can stay healthy, we can start to be able to forge those things. But I'm a big believer that things start, on the fronts, and then you can kind of build around that. And so hopefully we'll start to be able to see that in this, last half of the season.
Two things. How do you get, and some of this I think relates to what you're talking about, but how do you get the running game and Kyron going to that level? And then you're in your 8th season. I think this is your first time actually going to New England as a head coach.
Yeah, I guess it would be. Yep.
Did that seem a little odd?
Well, they came here in 2020, right. So the way that the schedules work themselves out. So, yeah, that was. I remember going there. When I was a coordinator in Washington, and Brady walks out to the Hove song, and you're thinking, "Oh man, that was it was impressive." But it's a great venue, historical franchise, and so. Seems like it's going to be a nice day from what I've heard, so it'll be cool, but it just kind of works out that way with how the schedule is situated. As far as the run game, man, where do you want me to start, Gary? There's a lot of layers to this, and it's always collective. It's all right, what positions are we putting guys in, and then ultimately is there an execution and an ability to be able to hit blocks, press the landmarks, and be able to stay connected and be able to do that. And in the moments that we've been able to do that, we've been able to efficiently run the football, but there's multiple layers to it. Always starts with us and what we can do to try to put these guys in the right spots, and then there's an execution element of it, and a continuity that's a big part of it. That there's a rapport that's established between the player next to you, and especially in some of the different schemes when you are working in concert or combination with guys that we haven't had the chance to be able to develop, and I think that's affected us, but. At the end of the day, people have to be able to deal with that. We have to be better, and that's been an area that's hurt our ability to be consistent, like what Sarah asked the other day.
Sean, to go back to the offensive line for just a second, in terms of the continuity you talked about, even with all the circumstances and context that you brought up earlier, at this stage of the season, do you think it's more important to get live reps for the 5 that you had to begin the season, or at this point is it more about just having your best 5 out there regardless?
Well, I think it's about finding what is the best group that collectively plays together, not just individual pieces, and what does that look like? What's that evaluation? And then how quickly can you get some guys that are back up to speed to be able to play the way that they're capable of? And there's a callus that is developed. There's a feel for the flow of the game. There's reps that were banked the other day that you can't simulate in these practice settings just based on how we operate. Not to mention that you're a little bit later, and now here we are on a short week where your physical reps are even more limited. So our goal is to be able to figure out what is the best way to put that unit together based on the guys that we do have, and to try to be able to put ourselves in a position to go compete to get the result that we're hunting up in New England, and that's where our focus is this week.
You guys have been talking about how Stetson asks the right questions during the team meetings. I'm curious if there's a question you've heard him ask that stands out to you and what that told you about
Stetson?
Yeah.
Here's what I would say. I think it's the quality of, all right, wherever that dialogue goes as it relates to maybe it's coverage contour based, maybe it's, how am I reading, with my feet, what am I getting in and out of on the run checks, and based on what this defense does, or maybe what's the history of it. I think there's just an inquisitiveness and an understanding to even be able to ask those types of questions. And what's been really cool is watching Matthew take him under his wing. Dave does such a great job leading that room with Matthew, with Jimmy, and then with Stetson. But watching the almost a big brother, a mentor figure that Matthew's become for Stetson has been cool to watch. And then Stetson's he's working really hard, and he's had a consistent rhythm that he's been able to implement. And it's challenging when you're not getting many physical reps. But you see him out here after practice. You see him going through different things with Dave Ragone. And I think he is starting to foundationally build a knowledge and an understanding that's reflected in some of those questions that you're probably talking about.
Did McKellar tend to speak to the team, and what did you guys talk about besides wishing you had a healthy roster for 1 week? Both?
Yeah, exactly. He didn't, he got a chance to come here on short notice, so he and I have forged a pretty cool relationship, Greg, and so, we're very passionate about the same things, and, different ways to lead. And as you're evolving and figuring out, all right, what does that look like based on this current team, these circumstances, your roles and responsibilities, how are you continuously delegating, and what does that evolution look like for him in year 5, here in year 8, and how you try to apply all those experiences. But you sit there with him, and you feel pretty inadequate because of the knowledge, the passion. But I'm a huge fan of him, and he's always so willing to share, and he's done a great job. I've become a huge Arsenal fan watching him and that group from afar.